Yo, all our stories are just for fun, okay? So, I'm a 32-year-old dude who used to be married to my ex, Sophie, who's 30. We were together for about 2 years and we were madly in love. It still blows my mind to think about how she cheated on me after everything we went through. Our history goes way back though, 'cause Sophie and I actually knew each other growing up in the same hood. It's kinda sad, but when I was around 15, her family moved to a new place and we lost contact. Years later, we randomly bumped into each other as adults. Even when I was young and clueless about love, I had a major crush on Sophie. When we met again as grown-ups, that childhood crush reignited. We talked for a bit and exchanged numbers. Luckily, Sophie was single at the time. After hanging out for weeks, I finally asked her to be my girlfriend and she said yes. We dated for a year before deciding to get married. Tying the knot may seem easy, but my love for Sophie runs deep. Marrying her made me feel complete. A lot has changed in our lives, but deep down, Sophie is still that smart, funny, and full of life person I knew from our childhood. She's now a junior high school teacher and I'm a mechanic at an auto shop. Sophie's the brainy one between us, with a thing for smart people, while I'm more about having an open heart and don't necessarily look for brainiacs like she does. That's one big difference between us. Between us, when we first started reconnecting and hanging out, I sometimes felt like I wasn't good enough for her. But as I got to know her better and we fell madly in love, I gained more confidence. I always made sure to go the extra mile to make her happy. Our marriage was amazing, filled with fun, sweetness, and laughter. Sophie had a knack for making married life so enjoyable and peaceful. We hardly ever argued or fought. When we were dating, Sophie told me how much she hated being yelled at and made me promise that I wouldn't. I promised myself I would never yell at her, no matter how mad I got. I made a vow to stay calm in any situation, and she promised the same. So, even when we argued, it got heated but we never raised our voices. When it came to having kids, Sophie and I were on the same page. We didn't see the point in waiting years before starting a family. It just didn't make sense to me. I'd rather have a kid within a year or two of getting married so we could all grow up together. Why I know, we wanted to wait until we were a bit older before we had our first kid right after we got hitched. We were so excited to start a family. There were times when Sophie thought she might be preggers 'cause she missed her period, but then it showed up the next day. In our first year of marriage, she did get pregnant once, but sadly had a miscarriage after just a month. It was a really emotional and rough time for both of us. We had been waiting eagerly to get pregnant for months, and when it finally happened, we had to deal with that. Man, that first loss was absolutely devastating. We thought it would be best to take a little break before trying again. But, damn, history really had to go and repeat itself. Sophie had another miscarriage at around 5 weeks into her pregnancy. The second time, she woke up one morning and saw she was bleeding heavily. We rushed her to the hospital and it was confirmed she had suffered another loss. It really messed us up emotionally. For months, the idea of trying for another baby was just too painful to even think about. I just couldn't. Why I know, I did my best to be there for her when things got tough, and I tried to stay strong for the both of us as time went on. We eventually started to move forward and leave behind the pain of those 2 terminations. I realized that Sophie needed time to heal emotionally, so I made a conscious decision not to bring up the topic of having kids until she had fully dealt with her grief. Our marriage eventually recovered from those tough months and life went back to normal. Even when things seemed okay, I still made sure to take care of Sophie. I treated her like royalty and made sure she had everything she needed. Besides her job as a teacher, she didn't have to lift a finger at home. I did all the cooking, cleaning, laundry, yard work, grocery shopping, and even made special meals for her sometimes. I was super attentive because I could tell she was feeling down and blamed herself for our recent loss. My main focus was to show her that it wasn't her fault and that I cared about her a lot. About 4 months after we lost our second baby, one weekend while I was cleaning the house like usual, Sophie came to me crying. I had just come back from the kitchen and her phone kept going off with notifications. I decided to mute them so they wouldn't wake Sophie up, but as I tried to silence her phone, messages just kept coming in on WhatsApp and Instagram. My curiosity got the best of me, so I used her fingerprint to unlock her phone. Why I know, I checked her phone to see who was blowing it up with messages. Turns out it was some contact saved with just a love emoji. I was curious to know who this person was, and my heart dropped when I saw they were chatting with some guy asking about my baby and her health during pregnancy. I had to read through their messages multiple times to understand what was going on, trying to figure out if he was a doctor or something. After doing some snooping, I found out he wasn't faithful. At the same time, I was creeping on her Instagram, and to my surprise, the same dude had slid into her DMs, even sending her a pic of his junk. I wouldn't have known about their Instagram convo if it wasn't for that message. It was through their Instagram chat that I found out Sophie had been cheating on me. Naturally, I had to figure out who this guy was and what made her cheat on me. As I dug into his Instagram, I found out he was... Man, I was in shock when I found out. It literally took me all night to wrap my head around the fact that this wasn't some messed up nightmare. What really got to me was realizing that I had been busting my butt to make a cozy home for a kid that wasn't even mine. So, that night, I grabbed a few clothes and headed over to my buddy's place to crash. I just couldn't stand being around Sophie after finding out about her shady moves. And to top it all off, I found out that her side piece knew she was married to me. Can you believe that? Sometimes I check in with her about how I was doing in terms of taking care of her and the baby. She'd usually say something like, "Yeah, he's trying." But the fact that she made it seem like I was only trying to be a good partner and Dad really pissed me off. I was the one doing everything around the house, looking after her, cooking her favorite meals at weird times, giving her massages, and putting up with her mood swings. Finding out she cheated on me with another guy was a total gut punch. It hurt like hell. So, this guy goes and lies to me about the baby's dad, right? Around 3 in the morning, Sophie wakes up and sees I'm not there. She gives me a call, asking where I'm at, and I tell her I'm still at the car shop, finishing up some work. I promise her I'll be back home in the morning, but I never show up. Actually, I end up staying away for 4 whole days, leaving her freaking out. During those days, Sophie keeps trying to call me, but I just ignore her on purpose. She finally decided to swing by the car shop where I work, but she found out I had taken a week off for family stuff. So, in the meantime, I made a fake Instagram account to snoop on Sophie's side piece. Turns out, he's been a scientist for a while and even won some fancy award. I also found out he's married to a psychologist lady and they've got 2 kids. So, wanting to spill the beans, I hit him up. My wife found out on Instagram that her husband was cheating on her with this woman named Sophie. She showed me all the proof, like messages on Sophie's phone. The next day, we met up with Sophie. It was crazy because I just got back home that same day. Sophie was in shock when she saw the evidence of her husband cheating. She was so upset and shocked when I told her that my wife was pregnant with her husband's baby. In the end, we decided to do something about it. So, I was thinking we should both just talk to our partners about the cheating. I was so pissed off and hurt after being away for those 4 days, when I got back home I just couldn't hide it. Sophie came running to me, but as soon as I walked into the living room, I straight up told her I wanted to do a paternity test for the baby. She was totally caught off guard and asked why I suddenly wanted a paternity test. I had to explain that I needed to make sure the baby was actually mine. She just laughed it off and thought it was ridiculous, refusing to agree to it. Man, she tried to pull off a paternity test saying the baby was definitely mine. I could see right through her, she was trying to play games. If I didn't already know the truth, she might have fooled me into thinking I was the dad. That day, I finally lost my cool and yelled at her for the first time in ages. She was shocked by my reaction. Then she started crying and accused me of falsely accusing her of cheating. She couldn't believe I would think she'd do that after everything we'd been through. I watched her cry and try to manipulate me emotionally, but I wasn't falling for it. I stood my ground and demanded a paternity test, even though she was totally against it. I showed her the screenshots I took of her chat conversations and threw them at her. She was shocked that I found out the truth. After a short silence, she tried to explain that it was just innocent flirting and nothing physical happened with the guy. Her excuses were weak, and I didn't even bother arguing. I just made it clear that anyone claiming to be the father of her baby was a big deal. Why did I have to see the damn paternity test results? We argued for hours until she finally agreed to take the test. When the results came in, they showed that the baby wasn't mine. Sophie then tried to play it off, saying she got pregnant with a donor and didn't know who the real dad was. I could tell she was lying, but I was too pissed off and tired to deal with it, so I just left her at the hospital. I went back home and I was packing up my stuff when she showed up and tried to stop me. I was so pissed off that I almost did something stupid, so I just bounced. No matter how much I tried to tell her how hurt I was, words just weren't enough. Sophie started going off on me, trying to make me stay, but I just left. We didn't talk for a week after that. She kept calling me every day. Man, she left me all these voicemails of her crying, shouting, and begging. It's like she's got a split personality or something. Just 2 days ago, her parents called me up and gave me a real earful. They called me a deadbeat dad and said I was the worst father ever. I wasn't in the mood for all that drama, so I just wanted to quietly split from Sophie without telling anyone about her cheating. And even though she's the one who messed up our relationship, she still went and spread lies about me to everyone she knows. I can't deal with this. People keep accusing me of stuff I didn't do, especially when I know it's Sophie who should be the one taking the blame. Her parents even threatened me with serious consequences if anything happened to their daughter or the unborn child, even though the baby ain't mine. I don't want the poor kid to suffer, so I'm keeping my mouth shut until she pops. Oh, and someone here brought up my plan to divorce Sophie without causing a scene. Just to set the record straight, I'm dead serious about it. I've had enough of this drama. I can't believe the drama in my marriage. It's even more messed up when I think about the idea that Sophie might have been cheating on me since we got hitched. Some of you thought it was too soon for us to tie the knot, but I thought I knew her well enough to jump in. But that's all history now. Last week, I posted on Facebook about the heartbreak Sophie put me through and how our future plans got wrecked. And guess who saw it? One of Sophie's Facebook friends. He hit me up after seeing the post. You know how social media brings people together. Turns out he's a teacher at Sophie's school too. He said he had some juicy gossip about Sophie and wanted to spill the tea. I agreed to meet up with him, and boy did he drop a bombshell. Apparently, Sophie has been messing around with some of the dads of her students. I was in disbelief until he showed me a video he sneakily recorded. According to him, Sophie has a thing for getting involved with the dads. So there were these smart kids in her class, and it looked like she was going after them hard. He said he wanted to keep me out of trouble, so he spilled the beans. He also said that the school knew about Sophie's bad behavior, which is why she got fired. It wasn't because she quit. Turns out, while I was busy taking care of Sophie and forgetting about myself, she was cheating on me. That's gotta be the reason, 'cause she was making money too. She never changed at all. Every morning, she'd dress up nicely for work and come back home around noon like usual. She'd even make up stories about having a blast with the kids in her class, which I now realize were complete lies. Saying I felt used by Sophie would be an understatement. I've never been lied to, used, or manipulated like this by anyone before. Hearing all those revelations made me angrier than I thought possible. In the meantime, I've already reached out to a lawyer. Hey guys, once the divorce is finally done, I'll start sorting out the paperwork. Not sure what to do next, but I'll keep you posted on how things go with Sophie and her constant drama. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this update. As you all said, going back to Sophie would be a bad idea. I don't love her anymore, and I don't even feel sorry for her after pulling off something so awful. I was trying my best to be a good husband and support her and what I thought was our kid. Who knows what else she's capable of? I'm not kidding, someone like Sophie can do anything. So, I finally decided to talk to her parents, who wouldn't stop calling. I went ahead and showed them the messages between her and her affair partner in their family WhatsApp group. I also sent a long voice message to explain everything in case anyone had trouble reading it all. Crazy stuff, man. Before my big showdown with Sophie, I straight up told her that I knew she was messing around with a bunch of guys and that the baby daddy was actually a scientist. The shock on her face was priceless. She definitely didn't see that coming. She had already shed some pounds from all the crying and begging for me to talk to her in the days leading up to this. I thought she'd keep on begging, but she knew her time for pretending was over. Instead, she got defensive and confessed to the affair with the scientist. Can you believe she had the nerve to tell me she cheated because she wanted designer clothes for her baby, not my crappy jeans? I was in shock when she said that to my face, but little did she know I had already spilled the beans to her affair partner's wife about Sophie being a serial cheater. Sophie didn't even feel guilty when she confessed, probably because she was hoping for some big child support payments. But it turns out her affair partner had other plans. He tried to make things right with his wife, so he demanded a paternity test. Shockingly, the results showed that he wasn't the father of the child either. It turned out that during that time, Sophie had been with multiple guys, including me, the scientist guy, and 2 other dudes. One of them ended up being the real dad of her kid. She couldn't figure out who the baby daddy was. About 2 weeks later, after her side piece found out he wasn't the father, my lawyer sent her the divorce papers. At first, she didn't want to sign them, saying I had messed up her life. Man, I had to put up with her crazy ass, it was a joke. And then, get this, when her parents found out she didn't even know who the baby daddy was, they kicked her to the curb. Eventually she caved and signed those divorce papers, so now we're officially done. She thought she could outsmart me, but she ended up losing it all, even her family. Now she's on her own to raise the baby, and I really hope she can track down the dad. Big shout out to everyone who had my back through this mess. Got in touch with her side piece in my last update, and it really helped me figure out what was going on and finally close that chapter of my life. Alright, that was an interesting story, now let's move on to another juicy one. Stay tuned and let's get into it. I'm a 34-year-old guy and I tied the knot with my wife, who is 29, 5 years back. Feels like just yesterday when she moved into our neighborhood and showed up at my door with some homemade cookies she baked as a way to introduce herself. Man, it's not every day you see someone bringing homemade cookies to their neighbors. Now was a really happy and outgoing person who was cool with everyone. When she brought over those cookies, I invited her in for a cup of coffee. We hit it off and became friends, bonding over coffee and cookies. We dated for 2 years before saying our vows. One thing Nell loved as much as she loved me was her garden. She was really into plants, with her background in botany. She even owned a small nursery. Her personal garden was her pride and joy. Why I know, she loved those flowers she planted in that garden like they were her own babies. It might seem weird, but every morning she'd have a chat with them while watering. Before we tied the knot, she made it clear I had to move in with her cause she couldn't bear to leave her precious garden. She didn't ask, just told me her decision. I was cool with it though, I knew how much she loved that garden. So, without any hesitation, I moved in with her and our married life started rolling. Things were going well between us until recently, but now the qualities that brought us together in the first place are causing some tension. You see, Nina and I are like night and day. She's super outgoing and social, with a ton of friends and always making new ones. Me, on the other hand, I'm the total opposite. I'm introverted and a little shy. I don't feel comfortable chatting with just anyone, and I only really click with a few people. I like to spend my time with a small group of close friends. My ideal holiday is just chilling at home with BAE, watching TV and cooking a nice meal together. I prefer staying in rather than going out. Now, on the other hand, loves going out, whether it's hitting up a cafe or hanging out with friends. To avoid any major conflicts, we set some ground rules at the beginning of our marriage. We made sure we both had time to do things we enjoy. Saturdays are for going out, which Nell loves, and Sundays are for staying in and relaxing. We used to have some good days where we could hang out and bond, which I really enjoyed. This setup was going well for a while, but lately things have been kinda weird. Nell has been out of the house a lot, hanging with friends or going to events. It seems like she's hardly ever home with me anymore. It's not like she's trying to ditch me or ignore me, she always asks me to come along when she goes out with her friends. But by the time I get back from work, I'm usually too tired to even think about going out and being social. Sometimes I give in and go out with her, but I don't really enjoy it. Talking to people is hard and I'm completely worn out by the end of the night. So, the next time she asked me to go out with her and her friends, I decided to just stay home. Honestly, I miss having her around the house. She's been going out more than usual and I find myself missing her. When she's not around, but when she finally gets home, she's always too tired and just heads straight to bed. I miss our deep talks and the bond we used to have. I don't want to be the kind of husband who stops his wife from doing what she loves. I want her to go out and pursue her interests, but it seems like she might not be as into spending time with me lately, and that's been bugging me. I'm wondering if she's gotten bored of our relationship, or if it's something else. Hey, so my girl has been super busy lately. I know things seem cool between us, but after hearing all these cheating stories, I'm being extra careful and on the lookout for any warning signs. Hopefully this paranoia goes away soon. After getting some feedback on my last post, I realized it's better to talk things out instead of keeping it all to myself. So I decided to open up about my feelings and insecurities. Okay, so I was talking to my friend, right? And she was telling me how she's an introvert dating an extrovert, and it's not always easy. She was saying how introverts can get insecure sometimes, thinking that their partner might get bored because they are not as outgoing. And introverts tend to overthink stuff, so she was stressing about how to talk to her partner without upsetting them. She was all worked up and I was just like, dude, chill out, you're just making it worse. Sometimes you just gotta be straight up and honest, why no? Hey, so I decided to have a real talk with Na and tell her what's been bugging me. When she got back from nursery, I caught her off guard by asking for a serious chat. I spilled all my worries and she actually listened, apologized, and promised to do better in the future to make sure I don't feel that way again. So, future was all she's been going out a lot lately cause her friends were in town after ages. But she said she's cool with going back to our old routine that we both liked. I was so relieved to hear that future handled the situation like a grown-up, instead of brushing off my feelings or getting all defensive. She totally respected how I felt, and I gotta give her props for that. We both agreed that talking openly and reasonably about things was the best way to deal with stuff. It felt really good to have that conversation. Me and Na were all lovey-dovey and on the same page that day. We got back into our regular routine, making sure to spend quality time together. I had hoped that things were looking up for us, and for a little bit, they actually were. But that didn't last long. About 2 weeks later, Na went back to her old ways, coming home late, hanging out with her friends more often, leaving me alone at home. What really got me worried was when I noticed Na had. So, the other day, I noticed that my girl had totally been ignoring her precious little garden. I always thought she loved that garden more than she loved me, you know. It was like her baby or something. But seeing her neglect it like that really got me thinking that something wasn't right with her. It was like something else had become more important to her than us, me and her garden. So, one day, just to kill some time, I decided to water the plants in the garden since she wasn't around. And that's when I saw that one of the plants had died. It freaked me out because I knew she was really attached to these plants and would never treat them carelessly. When she got home that evening, I pointed out the dead plant to her, and she was shocked because she had no clue about it. She left her dinner half-eaten and hurried to the garden to check on her other plants, with me tagging along behind. Nina was really upset when she saw the dead plant. Even though she didn't cry, she was clearly bothered. She blamed herself, saying her busy schedule and social life had caused her to neglect her garden. She just kept blaming herself. She promised to start taking care of her responsibilities more seriously from then on. I watched her, hoping she would go back to her normal self after that day. But instead, she became super focused on her plants, making sure they were well taken care of like she always did. Surprisingly, she didn't stop going out with her friends. She started waking up early to take care of her plants before going out at night. Spending time with me didn't seem to be a priority anymore. Her main focus was going out and taking care of her beloved plants. She always calls them her babies, and I know it sounds crazy, but I've started to feel a bit jealous of her garden and friends. I talked to her about it, and she said she'd split her time evenly, but now she's back to her old ways. I don't want to argue again and look stupid. I really want to fix this, but I don't want to bring it up with her again, so I decided to put some space between us 2 nights ago. I messed up when I got home from work. My girl was already there and she kissed me before telling me she was going out to meet a friend. She had made dinner for me, but I was mad and didn't say anything. As soon as she left, I left too. I didn't even touch the food she had made. I just called up an old buddy and hung out with him instead. I don't have many friends, so we had a ton to talk about since we hadn't seen each other in a while. My friend left around 9, but I didn't. So I went back home and decided to hit up a bar for a few hours. I usually don't drink much, but that night I got wasted. I wasn't planning on going back home, so I thought about booking a hotel room and crashing there for the night. I ended up booking the room, and when Nina called me, I ignored it on purpose because I didn't feel like talking to her or even seeing her face. She texted me right away asking where I was, but I made the conscious decision not to reply. I just sat on the bed in the hotel room, staring at the ceiling, wondering what the heck I was doing. My actions were dumb, but at that time I just didn't feel like dealing with her. I wanted her to feel a bit of the loneliness I feel every day, so I let her stress while I passed out and fell asleep almost instantly. The next morning, I woke up late because of all the drinking the night before. No surprise, I had a massive headache. I turned on my phone and saw a ton of texts from Na showing she was worried about me. I made the choice to go back home, and when I got there, Na was getting ready to head to work. When she saw me, she started bombarding me with questions. She was all up in my face, asking where the hell I was all night. She said she was all worried and pissed off. Honestly, her anger kinda made me feel good. I told her the truth, I didn't wanna come home to her because she's never around. I'm always by myself, so I'd rather chill outside. Then she flipped out, saying I just wanted attention like a damn kid. Her defensive reaction just made me even more mad, instead of just admitting it. Man, she really messed up by blaming me for everything. It was so annoying. We ended up having a huge fight, not holding anything back and saying some really mean stuff to each other. In the end, she stormed out of her nursery because neither of us was willing to apologize. I had to write this update to let out my feelings because this situation is getting unbearable for me. I'm torn between following her to see what she's doing or maybe even hiring a private investigator. I've had enough. Update, guys, that red flag I talked about before was definitely legit. I'm so glad I didn't ignore it, man. After that big fight, we just stopped talking to each other. Neither of us wanted to say sorry or make things right. We were both so mad, living in the same house but not saying a word. We still went about our daily routines, like me making breakfast and her making dinner, but the tension was still there. This time, I made up my mind not to be the first one to try and fix things. It wasn't a small issue. Man, my ego was feeling off when I got back from work a week later. I walked into a surprise, the lights were off, which was weird cause Na usually got home before me. I flicked them on and was shocked to see Na had set up a surprise for me. There was a cake on the table, balloons, and a poster saying, "I'm sorry." Na came up to me, gave me a hug, and apologized. I gotta admit, it felt nice to see her making an effort. She owned up to not listening and paying attention, and I appreciated that. Hey, listen up. Me and my girl patched things up and she even cooked my favorite meal. We had a great time eating and chatting for the first time in a while. It felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulders and everything was back to normal. We had a lot to talk about after our fight, and I was worried she was over it and didn't care anymore. She seemed so distant, and I was afraid our 5-year marriage was falling apart. But she did all this, showing me she's willing to work on our relationship. Getting married was supposed to be a way to show our love and make things work. Her love made me feel happy for a while, but then things went downhill fast when I found out about Nina's betrayal. Just a few days after we patched things up, my heart was broken in the worst way possible. I was at work when I remembered I had left some important papers at home. I had stayed late working the night before and left them on the study table. Since my office wasn't too far from home, I decided to quickly head back and grab them. So I drove home. I was totally not expecting anyone to be home, but when I saw Nina's car in the driveway, I was shocked. She had left for work in the morning, so why was she back? As I got closer to the house, I heard a man's voice and it freaked me out. Something just didn't feel right. Who could be with Nina in our house at this time of day? For a moment, I wanted to run away because I wasn't ready to face the truth. My thoughts were all over the place as I walked into the house, and to my surprise, I caught her getting cozy with our neighbor. It was a total shock. Man, it's so gross to find out she was messing around with that loser neighbor of ours. This guy AP just moved into the neighborhood not too long ago, and ever since then, she's been acting all weird. I couldn't understand why she was suddenly friends with everyone. I was sure it was her who started this whole thing, and it felt like history repeating itself, like our relationship all over again. I was in shock for a moment before I went after AP. Man, I was so mad I wanted to hurt him for what he did, but honestly, I was even more disgusted by what my wife did. I felt like kicking her out of the house, but it's technically her place. She begged me, saying it was a one-time thing and they both regretted it. She wanted a chance to make things right, but I just couldn't trust her. I didn't need to prove my gut feeling to her, but I was itching to catch her in the act. So I went straight to the security camera by the door, thinking it might have caught the person who. So I walked into my crib and realized we never even bothered to check the damn camera recordings all this time we've been living here. Our hood has always been chill and we've never dealt with any crazy shit, but now it's time to see what's been going down. I pulled up the footage in front of her and started playing vids from the past few days. I skipped ahead to the afternoon when she was with him, and it was clear as day that this wasn't a one-time thing. I was pissed off at both of them for real. I dumped his sorry ass for being a jerk and her for being a backstabber. Without uttering a single word, I grabbed my stuff, walked out of the house. She begged me to stay and chat, but I just pushed her away and left. Right now, I'm holed up in a hotel trying to figure out my next move. I've already contacted a divorce lawyer and started looking for a new place to crash. I've blocked her on every platform, but even after a week, her messages still end up in my spam folder. I can't even bring myself to read them because it just pisses me off. I'll give you an update later on. This part of my life is finally ending. When I last updated y'all, my mental state was a hot mess. But now as I'm writing this, I see how much progress I've made on the road to healing. Back in the day, revenge was all I could think about. I wanted to make Nina suffer just like she made me suffer. I was plotting and planning non-stop. It became an unhealthy obsession. I felt like I had to get payback, there was no way out. Even though she didn't hurt me, I thought of ways to get back at her. But things changed and I eventually got over it after the divorce was done. I was going to give an update once it was all over, but I didn't want to dwell on the past, so I just ignored it. Sorry about that. I did reply to those who reached out to me with kind words in messages and comments about a week ago. Then Nina contacted me through a new email after I blocked her. She told me before that she was feeling really crappy on a lot of levels. She also told me that her ex, AP, totally screwed her over in the worst way possible right after we split up. AP ended up moving in with her because, like I mentioned before, he was a lazy dude who didn't have a real job and was mooching off of Nina's money. At Nina's request, he started working at her plant nursery to help out, but that's when he started his little scam. He started taking plants from the nursery and selling them on the side at lower prices to make some extra cash for himself. Nina caught on pretty quickly. She noticed the plants were gone, and when she asked him, he said they were probably stolen at night. Then he somehow got ownership papers for the nursery and sold it to make a quick buck. After that, he disappeared with the cash, leaving her in a tough spot. She was heartbroken, having lost something so important to her. Now she's in a rough spot, with no emotional support and financial problems, all on her own. I just texted her back saying, she made me feel the same way, but now she's regretting wasting her efforts. I couldn't help but see the connection. I spent years building our relationship, only for her to toss it aside for a fling with our neighbor who clearly wasn't serious. It felt like karma coming back to bite her, as she felt the pain she caused me. My belief in karma grew stronger as she faced the consequences of her actions. She was getting what she deserved, and she didn't like it, despite my clear declaration of wanting. Nope, haven't talked to her at all. Tried to say sorry a few times, but I stuck to my guns and ignored her. Heard from a friend that she's in a bad spot financially because her business went under. The guy she cheated on me with disappeared and went back to his wife, leaving her completely on her own. Getting over that divorce was tough as hell and it really messed me up, but I had to move on. Threw myself into work to keep my mind off of her. It was awesome, man. I busted my ass to keep busy and ended up getting the promotion I always wanted. I couldn't have done it without putting myself and my mental health first. I cut off all my old connections and just focused on the here and now, which helped me get my shit together and find some stability.